Hello, welcome back, everyone. Let's check the agenda. So I know I added on the agenda this HWI topic. I know from you, Dan, that we were waiting for some discussion with Kieran. Today, other than this, I don't see anything else on the agenda. Maybe we should also discuss the current status of the various projects. Maybe if there's any updates. Um, I don't have anything in the meeting notes, so I'll just name some names, I guess. Venkat, if you want to go first, like any update on the SSD diags, the stuff that you're following?
Yeah, so I think the OCP diag adoption is actually underway. So I think we're hoping to keep the February deadline for completing that. So yeah, it's very much in progress now after holidays. So
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Rajat, any update you want to share on CTAM?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, yeah, just got some more features, trying to get more features in. I would like your help. I'll let you know when we want to move it to the main branch. As you know, we're still on the developer branch. I think we have reached a certain maturity, which I believe is worthy of main branch. Helping you on that. And the other thing, if we have time, probably sometime next week also is fine. For any of the diags, any tools, validation / compliance tools that this forum talks about, I'm pretty sure there's always an interest of scenarios that we expose to the external world, and also there's some scenarios which every organization would like to keep for themselves before exposing it to the outer world, right? So there's some kind of an internal testing versus external testing thought process, right? Let me know if there are some existing guidelines around or any framework constructs that we should be aligned to assist to kind of support that. That's I mean, we don't need to answer it right now, but just you can take it. I'll let you.
So just to maybe clarify a bit, your question is whether we have any guidance regarding how we separate the internal type testing versus the open source part, right?
You're right. So think about it as like a step towards making something open. It could be a step towards making some scenario open source, or it could be entirely something that you want to contain it within your organization, but you want to use the goodness of that particular framework tool, right?
Okay.
If you have some ready examples that we can just refer, then we'll follow that. Else, yeah, we can create something and we can let you know that, hey, this is how we had planned to do it.
So I am not aware that we have anything written down in terms of that particular topic, but I guess we could have a free form discussion at some point, because we have examples of products and projects that went through this, but at the end of the day, it's very particular to the actual project. So I guess the best that we can do is actually examples, right?
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, again, not the top in our list, but something that we started pondering about.
Right. On your other topic, yeah, just ping me on Slack, email, whatever, and we'll deal with it.
Sure.
Dan, did you want to add anything? You had your hand for a while.
I had the same question that you did, so I lowered my hand. But what I would say to Rajat is, if you've got something that you feel you need to keep confidential, that's one thing. And yeah, we all have that problem, like what we want to keep internal and what we want to share. If you're discussing at what point is it ready to open up to the world, though, if you're working on something, which is what I think your question is. I think my bias at this point is just to start in the open at version 0, if that's ultimately your goal, rather than getting it to a point where you feel like it's ready to share with the world. I think that's where I'm leaning these days, for what it's worth, but I'm not even sure that was your exact question.
Yeah, it was more along the second one you mentioned is one of the thought process usage models, but it's more the former, where we want to keep stuff internal, right? And we use certain Python constructs or C constructs that to achieve the same thing, right? So if you already have some guidance that this is how OCP TV would advise everyone to build their tools, then we can leverage that. Otherwise, yeah, either way, I'm fine.
So ironically, some of this will probably come up in the HWI discussion today, but I can talk a little bit maybe at the end about what we do here as we're going in and working on some of these things. Like we have some SSD diags right now that we've worked on with some of our ODM partners. And right now, those are on a private Git repo, right, where we've been kind of working with them, making sure that they work properly and things like that. But ultimately, we do plan to put those onto GitHub. When we do that, like I probably want to get through an MPI or two, right? But I think this is sort of the thing. I don't know that there's any hard or fast rules. We've went through this debate internally quite a bit. Like, there actually is a fairly large camp that feels that some of these diagnostics are, differentiating or a competitive advantage or something. And, in some areas I feel that, but in a lot of areas for like the commoditized diags, I actually think there's a lot of value in just sharing them and making sure we get the best of breed out to everybody, right? We're all using a lot of the similar hardware components, things like that, where I think, this sort of lifts all ships. But yeah, happy to have like a free discussion about this at the end.
So I'll add that this sounds to me like it intersects a bit with guidelines for writing diagnostics, which is a document that we were discussing a while ago, but hasn't yet started in any way. And yeah, part of that was also like how you package things, what languages to use and stuff like that. So it may fit in that agenda already. Okay. Daniel or Vincent, any quick update from Fava? Anything new?
Nothing from my side. We still have the rollout pending of the version of Fava that supports OCP output by default worldwide. We have it in the latest, but that one is not deployed to all the sites yet.
Okay, cool.
One random thought as Rajat was talking through this guidance that popped in. One area that has been sensitive in the past is naming vendors of products and manufacturers. There may be an opportunity to build a library that gives the option to obfuscate this. So this could be an interesting discussion as part of HWI, because that is a common problem, is the obfuscation of some sensitive regular expression to boil them down to that, specifically relating to vendor names. Just a random thought. Thanks for capturing the notes, Karen, by the way. On the Fava side, I was going to turn over to Daniel and ask if now is the right time to bring up the multi-process discussion, or should we leave that offline to Slack, or I don't know if that's something we should discuss. I'll lean on you, Daniel. I didn't hear you bring it up, so I think it's happening on the background.
No, I haven't brought it up with the team yet. I can bring it up now if you'd like, or we can leave it for offline discussion. But basically, when I was making Fava support OCP TV library, there were some problems with multiprocessing. Some of the multiprocessing libraries did not support OCP TV. The objects I don't think were designed taking into account multiprocessing. So for the time being, we use very little multiprocessing in Fava anyway. I just worked around it to use multi-threading instead of multiprocessing in Fava. But more generally, it's something that we might want to look more into in the OCP TV library.
Yeah, so I can answer to that. If you look at the to-do list that I put in the API there, you will see that multiprocessing is on the to-do list. So I specifically assigned a priority to it when I first wrote that.
Okay, I hadn't noticed that, and it's not critical for Fava at this point, but yeah, it's something that we should look into in the future.
Yeah, we can talk about it if it's necessary, if it becomes necessary, higher priority. Okay, thanks both of you. You're on the call. Do you have maybe an update on the PCI LMT? Did anything happened in the meantime?
No.
That was PCI LMT.
PCIM is no. There's not much progress on yeah, my end. So I think where we left off is there's an email thread going on discussing about the specific format of the message, the DAG artifact. So I think I gave feedback. I think I'm waiting for Satish to give his comment.
Yeah, so we have that discussion on GitHub as well. Thanks for that. And since you joined, Paul, do you wanna say anything about PCI crawlers? Any update you wanna share?
Yeah, I think you and I were going back and forth in December on some topics, and then well, it was December, so it got branched. But I accepted your change there on the none thing, and I think it's, if that's the only thing that's left, I think you and I have some disagreement on like the output format. But other than that, I mean, we've tested it. It works on my PC, and I think who's the guy from Microsoft that was running it and had some problems with it. But if some other people can go in and pull the pull request down and validate it and make sure that it works, it would be great, because I actually now I do have servers I can run it on, so I can actually validate it against servers. So that would make my life a lot easier. So I'll probably run it internally in Meta and see if our servers work. My biggest problem earlier was validation on like external, like on our enterprise services, right? Because when I ran it on my PC and the virtual machine, it was working completely fine. And then the guy from Microsoft, I forgot his name real quick, but he had some issues with it. So if some other folks from Microsoft and Google can pull it down and try out the PR, that'll be great. It should work. But if there's any issues, let me know.
Okay, thanks for the update, Paul. So on that question, since you mentioned it, Dan, if you would like to have a look at this PR that Paul just mentioned, I can send you the link. We're discussing the usage of the verdict field in the diagnosis message, right? And I have a different opinion than Paul has, so we kind of need a third party.
Yeah, for sure. Send me the link.
Less verbals, I'm on a more verbals level, so.
Okay, yeah, send me the link. I'll comment on that. Regarding somebody else to try it out, Kieran, would you mind taking an extra item just to download it from GitHub and seeing if we can get it running properly? I ran into the same issue as well originally, and I'm blanking on the library that I needed to install, but there is a master list of PCIe vids and PIDs that your library depends on, and I bet you that's what Microsoft was missing. I'll have to go back through my old notes and see what I had to do.
They ran into AER check error. It was completely different. It wasn't. So they ran it and then they said it wasn't detect. It was spitting out something different for AER errors. But then I tried it on my laptop and it worked fine for me. I was getting the right kind of output. But let me validate it. By the way, for the folks that don't know, I'm back at Meta. I joined back in December, and November. But yeah, I can validate it against some of our servers here.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot and see what we see on our side. Congratulations on your return.
I have returned, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So on the AR thing, the details are on the PR and the whole discussion. So if you want to look at that, then it's all there. All right, cool. So Giovanni, I have a quick question for you. We were discussing about that new standard that you're thinking about. If you wanna talk about that today, we can do it in the second half, since some people need to leave at 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem.
All right, cool. Now, thanks everyone for the updates. Kiran, Dan, do you want to start on HWA?
Sure. Kieran's feeling a little under the weather still. I think he may have had something that I had or something else, but I'll present today, and then Kieran, keep me honest if I say anything that's incorrect. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, what we wanted to do, this was before the holiday break, is we were debating whether or not the HWI made sense to include in the OCP diagnostics library, and deciding whether or not we wanted to do this. Like, there's obviously some downsides to bringing it in because it brings complexity. So Kieran and Raul were nice to put together like an example of some of the API calls we have and then what the output looks like on some of these. So if you guys can see here, these are the supported APIs that we have right now inside the HWI. And once again, this is sort of the abstraction library, sort of think of it as the WMI for how we go in and we find hardware. So we have things to clear errors. This is essentially the system event log. We've got ways to go and get in all the accelerator info. These are PCIe-based accelerators. In this case, anything hooked up to a PCIe bus that fits what we call an accelerator. Boot number, how many times the machine's been booted from the BMC, details about the CPU, power details, EEPROM info, errors from the system event log and other places as well right now. There's some Redfish event logs there. Fans, firmware, yada, 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 right? It kind of goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right? Memory convert is actually a really important thing for this particular group, although this includes a lot of code that we're not allowed to share at the moment. This is how we go from like a logical address when we're running something like memtester to a physical address that we map to a specific DIMM that it failed. And that code's obviously different on AMD or Intel or ARM. And on Intel, it's even different across different microarchitectures, right? They all work a little bit differently. Select backend is how you go in, you tell the HWI, like, what is the backend that it's using? We really have three that I can think of. We have the historical Jesus client, we have a Redfish backend, and then we have what we call on-host backend, which is basically a collection of little Linux utilities that we go in and we invoke to get some of this information. And you can also write things. It's not only reading them. You can do things like set bands, set band speeds, things like that, things that we need to do while we're going in and testing the unit. A lot of these are wrappers around IPMI or PECI or whatever the interface happens to be on the machine that we're using. But if you look at like a command, for instance, like get CPU info, it gives you information back. This is just the text proto of the topology, like how many sockets are in the machine, how many of the logical cores are currently enabled versus physical cores. In this case, you can see we've got SMT turned on, how many logical cores there are per socket. And we do this sort of like as a start for our CPU diags, where we may say, okay, we want to go and we run our stress test on every core. Well, we use this command to figure out how many different threads should we spawn and questions like that. We can see what is the type of CPU. Sometimes we have different diags that run on different families. Some of this we've had to sanitize a little bit. I'm going to scroll through the repetitive stuff here and we'll look at another example too. Wow, that's a lot of cores. Give me a sec. Okay, here's another example. So like a get EEPROM info, and this one gets interesting because here we can start to see like the ID info that we would parse into the OCP hardware info ID. This is the magic Google specific thing, which we call the dev path. And then here you can see this is more of the Redfish ID. Well, actually, that's not the Redfish ID. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that is. Kieran, can you help me on that one?
That is actually it's a concatenation of multiple things. It's more of an identifier for us to pinpoint a particular to be able to read and write. That's our implementation specific. It's not anything
Okay.
reflecting on the hardware. Dev path is one of them.
Yeah, in this case, not a redfish ID, but this is where you would see the redfish ID if we were happening to get this info over redfish. In this case, we're not. We're going and getting this on the host, right? But you can see whether or not the EEPROMs read write. You can see what the data format is. In this case, it's a FRU. So this is going to have things like what is the serial number, what is the manufacturer part number, what is the date code, lot code, all that kind of good information. If I scroll down here a little bit more, we'll take a look at maybe one more example. Fans are pretty simple, right? In this case, you see the path to the fan. These XXXs, by the way, are things that we've removed. They don't show up in the real output. You can see what the PWM value is to the pin. I'm not exactly sure where that's a floating point, to be honest. But and then you can also see the RPM value, how fast the fan is spinning. And this is something like we might have a fan test where we go and we set the fan to 3 different speeds by controlling the PWM value and then maybe reading back those values. If I go in, I'll look at maybe one more example. And then at this point, I think it's starting to get kind of repetitive. Let's look at get memory info. This one's kind of interesting. You can see here, we've got back a dim infos object. We can check to see whether or not the DIM is showing up basically to the BIOS and then also to the operating system in case it had like a training failure. You can see the memory type. In this case, this is system RAM. Our all important dev path to figure out where that memory is at. And then what is the silk screen name on that? In this case, it's just M0. And then you can see things like, did it train at the right speed? Is the checksum valid? The checksum's very much a Google thing. It's not like a JADEC spec or anything like that. It's something that we've added. But you can kind of go in and see what we use these for. And then you can imagine, like, as we take like a memory test, how you combine this with the memory test to make sure all the DIMMs that you want to test are there, that they're trained right before you kind of go and start the test. And we put all this stuff together, and that's how we make diags. The HWI stuff for us, just to reiterate, because there's a few folks that weren't here from last week, is important because if we want to go and run these internally in our data centers, this dev path field is really, really important. If you concatenate this with some other information that we have, you put these two things together with like sort of like a server prefix and then the device level prefix of the dev path, and then actually creates a globally unique name for every piece of hardware in all of our data centers, no matter where it is. So you can imagine there's like, I don't know, trillions of different dev paths when you put all these things together to find all the DIMMs and where they're at and things like that. So this is kind of an overview of our HWI that I just wanted to present. Because when we start having the discussions, do we want to include it? How do we package it up? Now, at least you guys can get a more concrete feel of what are some of the things that we use it for and what does the output look like. Any questions?
I have a quick one.
Hey, sorry, go ahead.
I have raised my hand. So I have a quick one. Is there any example with that API call that you mentioned where it gets you like a full DUT object as per the spec, even if it was V1?
There's a get hardware info command, which we don't have in here, but it will go and pull like the entire device tree, we call it. Actually, there is it right here. Am I still screen sharing or no?
No.
Okay. We don't have an example of that output, probably because it was a little too hard to sanitize, but that's exactly what it does. It just kind of recursively walks the whole tree and then finds all the different devices on it. If we do it with our internal clients, it's really easy. If you do it with Redfish, it's actually surprisingly tricky.
Dan, there is something called get node info. See if you can find that there.
Yeah, there's a node info down below. I think that's a little bit different though than what you're talking about.
Dan, if you are showing something, we aren't seeing the screenshot.
Sorry, let me present again real quick, and then I apologize. I got to drop off right after this to another meeting. So this is the node info that that Kieran was referring to. So a node for us is basically like a Linux subsystem within a machine. The most obvious example of a node would be if you think of a server that has a BMC. Well, I have two things running Linux, like our BMCs run Linux and our machines run Linux. We would think of both of those as a node. Another example might be like a smart NIC, where it's running Linux, the machine's running Linux, and the BMC is running Linux. In that case, we would have 3 nodes. But here you can see for getting node info, which would get you one of the nodes, I can see what all the frues are in that machine, right? So I can see here, this is an NCSI cable. It's the thing that connects the BMC to the console output. Here's a CPU. Here's a fan, lots of fans. These I2 cools are temperature sensors. Get it, like I2C cool, very clever. CPU anchors, to be honest, I don't even know what that is. The tray is actually the physical motherboard, so on and so forth, right? Kind of gives you an idea what this looks like.
Okay, thanks for the answer. Unfortunately, Raja just talked, so he didn't get to ask his question. I am sorry about that.
Yeah. No worries. I will be back next week if folks have any other questions. And by then, I think Kieran will probably be back to 100% can answer things.
Dan, before you go, and I should have added this earlier, regional summit. Can you check within Google if there's anything that you want to present at the regional summit? It's the 24th to the 25th of April. I think it's the start of February where the proposals should be in.
Yeah, I will. I'll put that as an item on our team, and then I'll also get with Amber, who kind of coordinates all of our OCP activities, and see if she's got anything planned as well.
Okay, thanks.
What were the dates again, Karen?
Sorry, it's in the minutes. So it's the 24th to the 25th of April are the dates on it.
Okay, yeah, if it's the 24th to submit or to present?
To present. I think it's I need to check. I think it's the 4th or the 5th of February to have the submissions. That I need to double check. I don't see it in the link I'm reading.
Yeah, that might be a little short notice for folks. So I will get back with you though and let you know what folks come back with.
All right, thank you.
Thanks everybody. Have a great week.
Before you go, do we have a link for this talk? Can we put it in the meeting notes?
Yeah, Kieran, would you mind adding it to the meeting notes when you have them on? I think it's totally okay to share.
Okay, thank you.
I'll do that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye then. Okay, so Giovanni, if you wanna discuss your topic a bit.
Yeah. So essentially, there are 2 topics that I would like to discuss. First of all, we never finished the specs for the test validation because we are missing the input part. So when we draft the output part, at some point when we finish, we said, okay, look, in the future we will do also the input part, but we never did that, and I think it could be nice to finish that that part of the specs. Also because that is a mandatory part for my second topic. That is a way to define and create a standard around how we could compose a diag. So in this case, I mean, when we are running a diag, so let's say that we have the input part of our specs, we could say, okay, look, we have this diag, this is an atomic operation that we are going to do for testing our hardware. And we could create the specs for saying, when you want to run this diag, you have to do all these steps, okay? Because if you're just running the diag, it could be that you could not get the same result that I will get on my side. So to be sure that we could get the same results, or if the results are different, we know that it's not because we are running different operation. It could be nice to have a specification around how we are going to run all the test session. And this means, I don't know, as an example, prepare all the stuff that we need, running all the different diags that we need with the input parameters that we want to run, and retrieve the output eventually. Well, the output is already retrieved, sorry. So doing all the part that could make a single diag a component for a bigger diag session, let's say. And in this way, we could like use them as a Lego block for running stuff around. I talked with Adrian about that, and he told me that Microsoft with their client, they are doing something similar. It could be nice to get in touch and like getting a little bit deeper there, understand if there is room for changing how the client is working or exporting some of the stuff to create a standard for all the OCP so that it's not related to a single tool that needs to be provided, but wherever we are running this specification, we know that we are running the test in the same way, and if we get different results, it's because there is something that is not working with the hardware and not because there are preconditions that are not met. So these are pretty much the two ideas. Again, the first one about the input is something that we already discussed in the past, and this other part is the new part.
Any questions, comments, concerns for Giovanni's idea proposal? By the way, it was Young from Microsoft that I was telling you about with the virtual client. I don't see him on the call right now.
Okay. I will get in touch with him offline.
So just to clarify the topic that we're discussing, we are talking about composing diags into a bigger run so that...
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
right.
So I can maybe fill in a bit for Young. I'm not a domain expert on virtual client, but I have looked at it. So what that project has is a series of workloads and some reporters and some stuff that you can use to determine the how to interpret the results from those workloads. And you write a JSON file, if I remember correctly, where you basically say, okay, run this workload and this other workload, and then report some stuff on them. So in a sense, that sounds pretty similar to what you're discussing here. I mean, I don't know how useful this addition is. I'm just trying to fill in for Young a bit. How would you like to continue this discussion? Like, do you want to set up a GitHub discussion to poll for opinions from people? Maybe these opinions will come back in time.
First of all, I would like to talk with Ian and let's have a little bit of discussion around that, also to see if they have any plan about that. And then, yes, we could go for the GitHub discussion, or because it's something that I would like to do internally, I could do some work internally, and then when I have something already done, I could propose to the wider audience and see if that could be appealing also for this workload.
All right. So I guess we have the next steps for that one then. I'll give you Young's contact.
Okay.
Don't have that one. Go ahead. Igor.
So this is basically about defining a test executor so that we can configure what diags we want to run. Is my understanding right? Or
it's a layer between the text executor and the diags. So it's not really a text executor because I don't care about what is running this specification. Okay, so
right.
the idea is that we have some way, some kind of payload, and we say, okay, look, you have to run all these steps. Then if you want to run with a bash script, or if you want to run with the most complicated program around, it's not my business, but you need to be sure to run all these steps in this exact order to get the same environment that I have for running the test.
I see. So it covers a part of what test executive does. So
Yeah.
it's about what we run, but not about how we run and how we report it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So this is like a test plan, is that?
It's more like a test plan. Yes. Yes. Makes sense. Yep.
And we basically want to define something like that in OCP, as a standardized way of defining test plans. Is it right?
Yep. Yep. Because in this way we could go from binary to binary. So to the text executor, we could go all in the middle and be sure that everything is standardized. And then what you are using before starting the test, or what you are using to reading the output of the test, we don't care. It's up to you. But we make sure that all that is in the between, it's standardized and it runs in a specific way.
I see. I think I proposed something similar to this internally. Basically a way to compose diags into a bigger diag. So maybe I should present this idea in the OCP context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to reformat my document, and maybe you guys will be interested.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Giovanni, how comparable would this be to, say, a Docker file where you say, use this image and then do these steps so that you have the system in a known state?
Say it again, sorry, Daniel.
How comparable would this be to, say, a Docker file where you can tell it,
oh yeah,
this image and
it's
these
pretty
steps?
much similar. So it's similar to a different kind of ideas that are around. If we want to take also another things that it's still more near to that, it's like a contest that we have inside. And yes, the idea is you are passing something that will configure everything that you want to run to be sure that you're running exactly in that way. So yes, Daniel, it's very similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, the steps, something like setting up the operating system and all the exact versions of packages can be quite lengthy. That's why if we have...
Well, no, sorry, I don't want to, I mean, if you wanted to build all the stuff you could do, okay? The idea it's more related, unless it's something that you really need for the diag, it's out of that scope. Otherwise, yes, it will become very, very huge. It could be that in some way, and for some diags, it could be huge because, as you were saying, you need to be sure that a lot of preconditions are there.
Right.
That is right. Yep.
A lot of times what you were saying of having the same input so that you have the same output to the diag, those inputs many times you might not even realize what all the dependencies necessarily are, right? You might have a different version of a library in the system, and you don't realize that that is going to produce a different output because that library that you weren't even considering has a different version.
Makes sense.
It can become quite a lengthy process unless we have predefined images that we can base off of, and that I'm thinking of Docker images, but something like that, unless you go from a known image and then you make changes on top of that known image, I think it might be very difficult to control that the output is going to be the same for everybody.
I get your point. I get your point, but at the same time, I think it's a step that needs to be done in some way, because otherwise, yes, we could run the diag. Just to give an example, if we're running inside or if we're running at the manufacturer, we could have different results, and you know that
Right.
this is something that is happening.
Yeah.
And I would like to avoid that part because it creates a lot of issues.
Yeah, but I think even with having the number of steps that we have to follow, we will continue to have those issues because that the base images that we're using are different.
That is something that I would like to discuss eventually in this work stream.
Okay.
So I'll quickly highlight all of these topics need to go into some amount of detail, right? Because we have questions like what is the difference between this and a test executor, and where is that point where you are no longer aggregating just the diags and steps and loop over some aspect, and where does that end before you start going into reporting and other stuff that the test executor would do. So arguably all of this discussion is valuable and should be on a format where we can go into detail on this. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, so I'm actually working on something I think that's kind of somewhat overlaps with what I think you proposed, and it is exactly kind of what you were just mentioning about the where the test executor end and where does where this starts, because I'm working on a dynamic test plan generation system so that we can have a standardized way of running tests across different vendors and things and locations and emitting effectively sub parts of a process plan. So, but it does to me need to be a lot more dynamic than just a JSON file, because it needs to take into account different hardware configurations and things. And if you have DIMMs, then run DIMM tests, for example. Clearly, all systems have DIMMs, but many systems have other types of hardware, etc. Is this the sort of thing? Like, am I correct in identifying an overlap here, or am I not getting what?
Yep, Marcos. And regarding the JSON file, it was just an example. I don't have any idea at the moment what could be the format. But yes, you are right in what you are saying, and I'm really interested in what you are doing because I think it's really valuable.
Okay, yeah. So for me, it's what I'm kind of ending up with is something similar. If we go back to what Dan was mentioning about this node concept, is the ability to identify a node, get the information from it as an input, a kind of here's the hardware that is supposed to be in there, and then pass this to the system, and the system says, oh, for that node, run these tests in this orders with this parameters, and that's the output. And then you would be able to call that across when you're identifying your, like for me, I'm focused manufacturing. So a system gets put into my to my test rack, it's turned on and powered up, and I find out, what are the details of it, and then say, okay, well, this is an important node, so that's go call its generator code and tell it, give me its process steps, or its steps, and then for that one, call this, and for that one, call these, and then that emits the full list of tests, and then I go off and I execute that.
Okay.
And the idea here is that I own the generator code, and it can be called by anybody else who's creating their test factory floor test solution. That in our world, everybody's using OpenTest, but they're not all. It's not OpenTest as a framework, not OpenTest as a solution. So they're still developing the test solution and how they talk to their shop floor and all that other stuff. But we're providing this standardized way to making sure we have appropriate coverage across platforms, and that we're all in control of that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I don't know if you are interested, we could find a way to start some discussion around that and see where they are going. Also to share different opinion, and if that makes sense, we could continue. Otherwise, if we found that it's too big or it's not the way that we could go, we could just drop the ball and that's it.
All right, so I guess what we can do at this point, I'll send you the contact for Young, and if you wanna join the email thread, Igor or Marcos, let me know, and I can add you to that same email. And then if that goes on, we can like expand it to a GitHub discussion.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Yeah, please add me to the email.
All right, thanks, Igor. Yeah, I'll add you. Right, so we're almost at time. If there's nothing else that anyone would like to raise for this week, we can end a bit earlier.
Adrian, I'd like
Yeah.
to bring up the regional summit again if we've got a couple of minutes, just because there might be other people in this group that have something that they'd like to present or have ideas of things that the group should present at the summit.
So I guess the question is there anyone that is interested in presenting at the OCP local, regional rather? I don't remember the name exactly.
Yeah.
Is there any chance the location is in Hawaii? Because then I'm definitely interested.
It's not Hawaii, but it is in Lisbon, which is in Portugal. The weather in April should actually be quite nice. Should be sunny. It's the southern part of Europe, so it'd be a pleasant place to go.
I would definitely consider Lisbon. Let me think if I can come up with some topic and justification to travel.
Yeah. No, if I so let me put the link in the chat, just so that people have it. Now there's a list of areas. That won't work. So there's a list of topics that they've listed, or a list of different areas. And it's just a matter of seeing if there's something that we can think of. Even if people weren't interested in presenting, are there topics that you think, or is there something that we should present that would be of interest to people there?
I don't think we have anything else right now. And if I remember correctly, Dan also said that this is a bit too close to the deadline. So I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah. I suppose, two questions, someone that wants to present, and the second question, is there something we want to present? If we're not seeing something that jumps out at us that we really want to present at the regional summit, the next opportunity is later on in the year at the global summit, and ensuring that we have something for there. And maybe the item to look at going forward might be, what topic do we want for the global summit, and maybe have that prepared a little bit earlier in advance.
Yeah, we're certainly going to do that, but the global summit is like in October, so there's a lot of time until then to decide what topics. Essentially, we'll probably do the same thing as a status as we did before, and if there's new features and other things that we can talk about, those will come up during the year.
Yeah, I think it's June, the date for the global summit, but we've still got plenty of time. It's grand.
Also, it's earlier this year. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's that. All right, that's all for me.
Yeah, we can revisit this, in a couple of weeks maybe. to ask again.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And on that note, thanks everyone for joining this week, and we'll see you next week with new updates. Thank you. Bye.